Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles. Why do all these cheating wife stories sound so trite? The same old synopsis. I came home early, I found an email, I caught her and her lover at the office Christmas party, I just happened to be driving past a motel and saw her car parked in front of her room. There must be other ways a coupled husband discovers his wife's adultery, at least you'd think so. Then again, maybe not. Maybe there are only a half dozen ways a man comes to realize his marriage has just come to a shit-screeching halt. I know in my case I was so in love with my wife of 10 years that it took a total lightning strike to get me to understand what had been going on between my wife and her lover for the past 6 months. I did not have a clue. Shannon and I met in college our sophomore year and were instantly attracted to each other. She had rich auburn hair and blue eyes, a pretty face and a slim svelte body with long legs. She was, in a word, perfect, at least to me she was. With all that going for her, the thing that made me fall head over heels was her personality. She was intelligent, bubbly, and fun. I could talk to her for hours about everything and anything. We were best friends, and after going together for 3 months, Shannon and I made love for the first time in the backseat of my car parked behind the town baseball diamond. It was to that point the highlight of my life. It was fumbling and awkward. When our bodies finally joined together, she cried, not from pain she assured me, but from happiness. I will never forget her words. "Oh Stu, we did it." From that moment on there was never a doubt that Shannon and I would be together forever, or as it turned out for 10 years anyway. My name is Stuart Gray, but everyone calls me Stu. I was born and raised in a medium-sized town in the Midwest. I'm 6 foot even and weigh 187. I'm considered reasonably good-looking with brown eyes and sandy hair. By profession I'm a contractor. I have my own small company with a permanent staff of 5. We handle mostly interior upgrades for folks who can afford them, and our work is considered superior. Shannon teaches music at a local high school and together we make a very nice living, have a beautiful home, and since we're both in our early 30s are planning on starting our family in the very near future. Like I mentioned earlier, we have enjoyed a wonderful first 10 years of marriage. Our sex life was awesome, though I'm not going to exaggerate like some do, and tell you we'd go at it twice a day, every day, more like 3 times a week, but it was always loving and often hot and steamy. We snuggled every night. That was an unbreakable rule, and every morning when I woke up next to Shannon, I was amazed at how beautiful she is and how lucky I was to have her for my wife. I can honestly say that, even though I'd much rather live every day with her, if I had to give up my life for her I would do it without hesitation. I guess I really should have made that last statement in the past tense, since out of the blue something blindsided me, something so totally unexpected and emotionally staggering that I can't to this day say I've completely recovered from it. As a contractor in the Midwest, most of our work is confined to the spring, summer, and autumn months. People just don't seem to like the interior of their homes torn apart when it's 5 degrees outside and there's 3 feet of snow on the ground. For that reason, the vacations that Shannon and I took were usually around the Christmas and New Year's holidays and over spring break. During the summer when I was busy making money, Shannon occasionally took a week to visit her folks, went on a shopping trip with her 2 sisters, or took a summer class or 2 to keep her teaching credentials current. Our favorite trip each winter was to someplace warm, and in the winter of our destruction we chose an all-inclusive resort in the Bahamas, 2 weeks in paradise for the 2 of us to reconnect in body and spirit. What I soon found out though is how wrong that thought was. I first have to explain that before Shannon and I climbed on that plane in Minneapolis, I not only didn't have a clue, I would have called you a liar and spit in your face had you dared to imply that there was something wrong in our marriage. We were the perfect couple, so madly in love and deeply connected in every way that it was almost like the 2 of us were one person merged into 2 bodies. Ours was a union so strong that nothing in heaven or earth could ever come between us. I guess I just forgot that there was also a hell, and though I didn't know it at the time, I was teetering on the brink, about to fall into the molten abyss. The first inkling I had that something wasn't quite right was at the security check-in at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. The line was long, lots of folks trying to exchange the extreme cold for some tropical warmth, and as Shannon and I waited in line to go through the scanners, I noticed a man in the line next to us glancing at Shannon. Now that's not unusual. My wife is a striking woman and often has men casting slightly lustful glances her way, but this seemed different, almost like he was trying to get her attention. I wanted to learn more, so I pretended to look down at my boarding pass while watching the guy out of the corner of my eye. His glances in her direction were furtive to say the least, and then I caught it. Shannon's quick glance back at him, and a subtle flick of her hand as if she was saying, "Not now." He smiled and nodded, and I almost lost my breakfast. I was stunned. It was then I realized that the 2 of them knew each other. How well I wasn't sure, but that knowledge sent up all kinds of warning flags. As we continued through security, I watched the 2 of them carefully, and there was no further attempt at contact on either of their parts. I know I became very quiet, but for some reason Shannon didn't seem to notice. I guess her thoughts were elsewhere. My hope was that the man, whoever he was not on our plane, But once we boarded and took our seats, I saw I was mistaken. He was sitting in an aisle seat about 15 rows in front of us. Another thing that seemed odd to me was that Shannon decided she wanted the aisle seat in our row. That never happens. She always wants to sit by the window, but not this time. I asked her what was up since I pre-booked the window seat for her, giving myself the middle seat, but she just said her breakfast wasn't agreeing with her and she didn't want to disturb anyone if she had to use the restroom. I asked the woman sitting in the aisle seat if she minded taking the window seat instead, and when I explained about my wife's stomach issues, she readily agreed and the exchange was made. I usually have no problem sleeping on a plane, and the long flight between Minneapolis and Miami would afford me that opportunity. But in my heightened state of anxiety, there was no way I could sleep on that flight, though I was going to pretend to. We stowed our carry-on items in the overhead bin, and Shannon placed her purse under the seat in front of her. Once we were airborne, I took out my twins' baseball cap and pulled it down over my forehead and pretended to fall asleep. I gave myself enough space to keep an eye on Shannon, and 15 minutes later, she glanced down at me, and once she was confident I was sleeping, she got up and made her way up the aisle toward the restrooms. I shifted in my seat so I could see the full length of the aisle and noticed that when she walked past the seat occupied by what I now assumed was an acquaintance of hers, she put her hand out as if to steady herself and briefly touched the guy's shoulder. More proof that something was up between them, and this whole thing was no coincidence. I noted that they hadn't looked at each other, and Shannon made her way to the restroom. When she came out moments later, she looked right at him, and he stood and walked towards her. When they met in the aisle, instead of one of them turning aside so the other could pass, they faced each other and stopped for a brief moment. He placed his hand on her waist, she touched his chest for a second and spoke to him. They both smiled warmly, and as she continued back towards her aisle seat, his hand slid down her back, causing Shannon to smile again. That was all I needed to realize that these two had known each other for a while and were obviously intimate at some level. At the same time, it also hit me like a ton of bricks that my wonderful marriage was in real danger and might very well be over. I was suddenly engulfed in so much angst that I had to turn my face away from Shannon as she sat down and buckled her seatbelt. How could she do this to me? How long had this been going on? Who was this man, and how far had they already gone in their relationship? For the rest of the flight, I tried to make some sense out of everything I'd seen and prayed that when we transferred to our flight to Nassau, he wouldn't be on it, but somehow I knew he would be. Much to my pain, I was right. As soon as Shannon and I boarded the plane, I saw him sitting 5 rows behind us. He was reading the in-flight magazine and paid no attention to us as we took our seats. Shannon, now apparently no longer suffering stomach issues, took her usual seat by the window. The flight to Nassau was uneventful, and after landing we picked up our luggage, rented a car, and made our way to the resort. Shannon texted while I drove. "Who are you messaging?" "Oh, just my mom and sisters, letting them know we got here." "Yeah, maybe," I thought, "but I'd sure like to see for myself." Isn't it strange that when suspicions start, they just snowball? Our room was beautiful with a balcony, ocean view, and a view of one of the pools. As we unpacked, I knew I needed to make a statement in an effort to reclaim my wife, so I walked to Shannon, wrapped my arms around her, and kissed her neck. "Do you realize how much I love you?" Shannon twisted around to face me and gave me a light peck on the lips. "I love you too, baby," she said. There was a strange light in her eyes, as though she wasn't really there in the room with me. It made my skin crawl. I kissed her again. "You know I would never do anything to hurt you, don't you, Shannon?" She flinched slightly. "I know that still. And I know you would never do anything to hurt me or our wonderful marriage," I told her, and she flinched again, and I saw moisture build up in her eyes. "Of course, Stu, you know I wouldn't." But she couldn't look at me as she spoke. She just stared down at the floor. I knew then that I had likely lost the battle. If she hadn't done it already, I now knew she would soon be giving herself to another man. I let go of her and walked quickly to the bathroom, hoping I didn't lose it before I got there. I stayed in the bathroom for several minutes, regaining composure and asking myself the same questions over and over again. How did this happen? What had I done to drive her into another man's arms? Why hadn't I noticed something weeks or months ago? But most importantly, what can I do to stop her from destroying us completely? Or is it already too late? I washed my face and walked out of the bathroom. Shannon was standing there with a strange look on her face. "Oh my God, Stu, my period just started, and I didn't bring any tampons with me." "What?" I said. "My period, Stu, it just started. But you just got over it a week ago. How could it have started again?" "I don't know, it happens sometimes. Maybe the excitement of the vacation brought it on. I've got to go down to the gift shop and get some tampons," and she left, closing the door behind her. My first thought was maybe that's a good thing. It will slow down the romance between her and her boyfriend, whoever he is. My second thought was, wait a minute, that just doesn't make sense. It had never happened to her before in all our years together. She was on the pill and her periods were always as regular as clockwork. Then why would she make that up? Unless she thought that having her period would stop me from pressing her for sex so she could devote all her love and passion to her new man. That had to be it. And if it was, then she was not the woman I married. No one could be that devious and cruel. She must really hate me to let me plan and pay for this trip so she could shut me out of her life and give everything she has to a man I've never even met. I felt totally lost, like I was losing my mind. Who was this woman that I had loved with all my heart for over a decade? As I looked around the room, I saw she'd left her cell phone sitting next to the television set. I turned it on, not knowing if she had changed the passcode, and discovered she hadn't, another mistake on her part. I went at her messages and read the most recent ones from someone named Anthony Eisner. I thumbed back to the beginning of the stream, which started when we were in the car driving to the resort. Anthony: "Hey baby. OMG, you look so hot. Can't wait to have you." Shannon: "You brat, you almost got us caught by Stu at the airport." Anthony: "Couldn't help it, Shan. I almost kissed you on the plane when we were in the aisle." Shannon: "Stu was sound asleep so you could have, but it might have looked bad to others. Little preview of things to come. LOL, gotta go, we're almost there." The conversation between the two of them restarted after we were in our room at the resort. Anthony: "I'm in the lobby. You here yet?" Shannon: "In my room. Stu's in the bathroom. He's acting odd." Anthony: "Who cares? When you leaving, Stu boy, so I can have you all to myself?" Shannon: "I've told you from the first time we were together that I can't and won't do that, Tony. Stu is a wonderful husband. He loves me and takes care of me and gives me the kind of life you never could." Anthony: "But I am a better lover than him." Shannon: "Oh God, yes. No one does me like you do, baby. You know that. You make me feel good and take me places Stu has never dreamed of taking me. But as good as you are, I need more than your hot love, and that's what Stu gives me. Stu and I are getting ready to start our family, so this next 2 weeks is just for you, baby. I told Stu I would stop taking my birth control pills when we get home, but I really stopped taking them almost 3 weeks ago. So now you have your chance to give me your baby. If you can make a baby in me in the next 2 weeks, then we'll create the child that Stu will raise thinking it's his." Anthony: "You are so nasty, Shan, but I love it. I'll make a baby in that sweet tummy of yours." Shannon: "God, you're making me shiver. I can't wait to be with you." Anthony: "What about Stu boy? How do you know he won't beat mine to the punch the next 2 weeks?" Shannon: "Because he's not going to have sex with me, silly boy. I'm going to tell him that my period just started up again, and oddly it's going to continue the whole time we're on vacation. LOL. Anthony: "You sure he'll buy it?" Shannon: "Of course. He loves me and he knows I'd never lie to him. Besides, when we get home, I'll make it up to him." Anthony: "Oh, he is so stupid. What a loser." Shannon: "Stop calling him that or you'll be the loser. You'll lose me for the good." Anthony: "We both know you're not going to let that happen. You need my love too much." Shannon: "That's true, but I still don't like you saying things like that about Stu. He's a good guy." Anthony: "Okay, meet me in the lobby. I need to taste your lips, both sets of them, but I'll settle for the ones on your face for now." Shannon: "And you call me nasty? You get exclusive use of my lips for the next 2 weeks. Give me 5 minutes." I stood there in total shock, started to replace her phone and stopped. There's a possibility I could find a way to use those messages for evidence in the divorce. I started to replace her phone with mine and then thought my phone has all my personal information in it. She's made this mess. Let her try to find a way out of it, so I kept both her phones. I figured it wouldn't take her long to figure out her phone was missing, but by then I'd be long gone. I could taste bile rising up into my throat, gagging me. I went to the window and gazed out at the beautiful Caribbean. 8 hours ago, I was the happiest man on earth, getting ready for 2 weeks of romance in the tropical sun with the love of my life, my wife, my soulmate, and now my world has crashed around me. Never in my life had I felt more alone, shocked, and angry. I wanted to hurt both of them, destroy them for making such a wretched fool out of me. Fortunately, the rational side of my brain slowly took control. Divorce was a certainty. There was no way I'd stay with the cheating witch that had been my loving wife. I wanted more, though. I wanted revenge. While staring out the window, I happened to glance down at the pool, and there they were, their arms wrapped tightly around each other, lost in a passionate kiss. Anthony dropped his hands to caress Shannon's back, and she lifted her right leg and pushed her crotch against his thigh. I wanted to throw up, but instead took a deep breath and used my cell phone to video their actions. I guess while Shannon was unpacking, she never bothered to look out the window in our room, or she would have noticed that the pool was in plain sight. I needed a plan, and I needed it quickly, but my guts were in spasms and my brain was in lockdown. Then it came to me. It was simple, really. Shannon wanted 2 weeks with her lover Anthony to give her a baby, and I needed time to get the ball rolling on breaking our marriage in two. I'd give her the 2 weeks and get the hell out of Dodge. I had only unpacked a few items of clothing, so it took me no time at all to repack. I looked out the window to make sure the lovers were still entwined, and they were sitting close together, embracing, talking, and laughing, probably making plans for their first island rendezvous. I was about to make that really easy for them. They could have his room or hers and spend as much time together as they wanted. I was out of here. As I started toward the room door, I had a thought, and it actually made me smile. I pulled her undies, nightwear, and dresses out of the drawers and closets, piled them all on the floor, and pissed all over every item. Then I opened her suitcase and pulled out the KY gel she'd packed and poured it on the pile, and then I took all her perfumes, shampoos, and cosmetics and quickly added their contents to the sticky mess just to add to the statement. Of course, she'd have everything washed, but at least it would keep her from dressing provocatively for her lover for a day or two, even though I realized that what they wanted to be was naked together, so her messed up clothes wouldn't matter. Oh well, it made me feel a little better anyway. I zipped my pants and without looking back walked out the door, not bothering to close it behind me. When I got to the desk, I told the clerk that an emergency had come up and I had to return home. She informed me that there would be no refund on the 2 weeks, and I told her okay. I would lose the money I'd paid in advance, but it was worth it to get away from my wife and her lover. Besides, I'd just deduct the amount from her share of the divorce settlement. After all, she's the reason the vacation turned to shit. I drove the rental car back to the airport hoping to catch a flight to anywhere. Fortunately, there was a plane leaving for Orlando in 2 hours, and I could make a transfer to Minneapolis with just a 90-minute layover. I checked my bags and passed through security and found a corner seat at a bar and ordered a double scotch. It had been just over an hour since I'd left the resort, and I knew that Shannon and her lover knew by now that I was gone. Still, I was a little surprised when Shannon's phone, now my phone, rang. I saw the call came from a number I didn't recognize, so I ignored it. I let it go to voicemail and listened to Shannon, almost in hysterics, cried out, "Stu, what is going on? Are you out of your mind? Why did you ruin all my beautiful clothes? Call me baby, I'm worried sick about you." No, Shannon, you're worried about you, and your ruined Sexfest vacation, I thought. I erased it, and 5 minutes later another call came through. "Stu, you're scaring me to death. Where are you, baby? I don't know what you think I've done, but you're wrong. I would never do anything to hurt you. I love you, Stuart. Please God, please call me." Again, I erased the message. After 3 more frantic calls, I sent her a text message. "You messed up, Shannon, and left your text messages on your phone. You and Anthony have a wonderful 2 weeks making a baby. You'll be served divorce papers when you get home, and Anthony will be sued for alienation of affection. If I find out he works with you, I'll sue the school district too, and I'll fight to have you both fired on morals charges. But hey, now you have each other, and Tony boy can have you again and send you to all those places I've never been able to send you. I never realized our sex life was such a terrible disappointment to you." 10 minutes went by, and I got a text message from Shannon. "Oh God, please don't do this. I was never disappointed in your love-making, never. Stu, you are my world. This whole thing was just a stupid mistake. I would never have followed through with it. I'm sorry." 2 minutes later, another voicemail. I could tell she was sobbing. "Please, baby, I beg you. I don't love Tony. I only love you. I'll die without you. When you die, I'll visit and I'll spit on your grave." I thought. My message back: "There is no way you can love someone and do what you did to me, and now that I know you've been screwing Anthony for a long time, I want nothing more to do with you. You lie and cheat without remorse. I don't even know who you are. Cheaters like you and Tony deserve each other. Goodbye, Shannon. I don't ever want to see or talk to you again. I hope you and your lover have this totally shitty life together. God knows you both deserve it." I pressed send and turned the phone off. The house looked different when I pulled into the garage. Colder, I guess, or lonelier. There just wasn't any happiness left in it. It used to be a home, but now it was just a shell with furniture. On the plane, I'd jotted down a list of things I had to do. One of them was to list the house with a realtor. The market for homes was down, but at least I'd get out from under the payments. Shannon and I had left for the Bahamas on Saturday, and it was now Sunday night. A hell of a lot had happened in 36 hours. Tomorrow I'd get the divorce started. Now I was exhausted and just needed sleep. The sun was shining when I woke up Monday morning. My head was pounding and my mouth tasted like a cat had licked inside it. I stumbled to the kitchen and made coffee and turned the cell phone on. There were over 20 messages, all the same, begging for forgiveness, telling me that when she saw I'd left her, she called Tony and told him she never wanted to see him again. She swore she'd never had sex with him. It was all a big joke. He'd never actually had sex with her. She just liked to tease him and then come home to me to get her sex. How stupid did she think I was? Not only did I hate her, I actually felt embarrassed for her too. The last message on the phone was from Anthony, telling me I could do whatever I wanted to do to my wife, that she was a lousy 304 anyway, and he was glad to be rid of her. But if I tried to do anything to him, he'd make sure I would regret it forever. I responded with, "Listen, shitwipe, I will do anything I want to you, and you will sit there and cry like a baby. You are the lowest form of life, not even a man. You can't get a woman of your own, so you have to prey on other men's wives. I hope you have eyes in the back of your head, because you will need to look over your shoulder for the rest of your miserable life. Oh, and by the way, your career is over. You are going to wish you had never been born." By 10:30, I'd made an appointment with a divorce lawyer for the next afternoon, and by noon I had all the little things like credit cards canceled, and checking and savings accounts divided up. I'd worry about the life and medical and car insurance later on. I didn't have to change the door locks since they were all Baldwin Prestige locks, and all I had to do was adjust them to work with a different key, an easy process. I was ready for Shannon's return, but I wasn't sure she'd come back to the house. For all I knew, she might stay with Tony, even if it did sound like my departure had put a damper on their baby-making plans. If I were her, I'd just stay out the remainder of the 2 weeks at the resort. Everything was paid for. At the very least, she could come home with a nice tin, whether or not she had Tony's baby in her oven. I didn't hear any more from Shannon or Tony and slept fitfully Monday night. Tuesday morning, I called the insurance companies and took Shannon off all the policies. She had her own health and life insurance through the school district. Next, I went about the painful task of boxing up all of Shannon's clothes and personal items and placing them in the garage. I knew I'd missed a number of things, but she'd have an opportunity to claim them later. That afternoon, I paid my new lawyer a visit. I told him the story, showed him the text messages and the video I'd taken of them. He had sympathy for what Shannon had put me through, but since there were no children involved, adultery would not sway the courts in my favor. A 50-50 split of all assets was the likely outcome, though I could keep any property ceded to me by my parents before we were married. In other words, I was screwed. Well, whatever it took to get away from Shannon would be worth it. That night, as I was relaxing with 4 fingers of single malt scotch, the house phone rang. I figured it was Shannon and thought I might as well get it over with and talk to her so I could tell her to go screw herself. I answered it. It was her sister Deborah, who lived half an hour away in St. Paul. Stu, what the hell did you do? What are you referring to, Deborah? I was amazed at how calm I felt. Your wife is in my guest room right now, and she is a complete basket case. She can't stop bawling. She looks like she's practicing to be a homeless person, and all I can get out of her is you are divorcing her. I'm not going to get into any of the details, Deborah. If Shannon wants you to know what happened on our vacation, she can tell you. Suffice it to say, something occurred that shattered our marriage, and I had no choice but to return home early, alone, and I'm going to divorce her. Stu, you can't be serious. Shannon loves you with all her heart. She lives for you. You have to be mistaken. I'm not mistaken, Deborah, and I have video of her actions to prove it. Please tell Shannon that most of her clothes and other belongings are packed up in the garage, and she can get everything whenever she's ready. I just can't believe what you're telling me, Stu. You are all she ever talks about. You and the baby you two are going to have. Well, her baby plans made a sudden change when we got to the Bahamas. She still planned on making one, just not with me. I've said too much already, Deborah. Anything else needs to come from Shannon. Is she staying with you for a while? Yes, I guess so. I have room for her. I just want you two to get past this and get back to your lives together. Not going to happen, Deborah. Shannon and I have no life together and never will again. Her choice was to throw us away in the most humiliating way possible. Is it okay if I have the divorce papers served to her at your place? Oh, Stu, can't you wait, for her sake? No, she didn't do anything for my sake, so I'm returning the favor. When will she be served? In a couple of days. I'll give you a heads up before it happens. I'm sorry, Stu, for both of you. I thought you had the perfect marriage. I thought so too, but Shannon wanted something else. I hung the phone up and went back to my scotch. Shannon was served the papers at her sister's house 3 days later. She didn't even bother to get her own attorney. She agreed to the settlement and said she would sign them with only one stipulation, that she be allowed to meet face-to-face with me one time to tell me everything. I didn't want to hear it, but if that was the fastest path to our divorce, then I'd do it. We met in a private conference room at my attorney's office on a Wednesday afternoon 3 weeks later. I got there first, and when Shannon walked in, I almost lost it. She looked so frail and defeated, and she couldn't look me in the eyes. I could tell that the ordeal had been really hard on her, but it was her doing, and it had devastated me as much or more than it had her. There was a box of facial tissues and a bottle of water in front of each of us, and I had no doubt they would be used before the conversation was over. How have you been, Shannon? She shrugged. Oh, not great, Stu. Not great at all. Unfortunately, I can't say I'm sorry, I told her, and she nodded her head. I know. She wiped her nose with a tissue and sniffled, still not looking at me. What did you want to talk about? She glanced up at me for a second, then lowered her head again. I wanted to explain everything, but I don't know how. Why don't you start from the beginning? Okay, Stu, I'll try. She took a deep breath and cleared her throat. Anthony and I met last summer when we were both taking classes at State. We had coffee a couple of times and dinner once. We got to be friends. We talked a lot and flirted, but that's all. I always made it perfectly clear that I was very happily married. When the new school year started in September, I was surprised to see that he had been transferred to my school as the new vice principal. We had lunch a few times, and then after a long parent-teacher night, he asked me to have a drink with him to unwind. I knew I shouldn't do it, but I enjoyed his company, so I said okay. Did anything happen between the two of you that night? No. Well, yes, kind of. We had a couple of drinks, and at one point Tony took my hand and told me he really liked me. What did you say? I told him I really liked him too. Then he said he wanted to get to know me better, spend more time with me, be alone with me, just the two of us, somewhere private. And you reply to that? I told him I love my husband and I can't do anything to jeopardize my marriage. What did he say? He said that we would be careful and discreet and you would never have to know anything about it. He told me that it would be good for my self-esteem to see how badly another man wanted me, and he promised me he would never do anything that would make me uncomfortable. He just wanted to let me see how good it felt to be loved by a man other than my husband. Did he tell you what he wanted the two of you to do? She shook her head. He didn't have to. The way he held my hand, and the look in his eyes, and what he said made it clear that he wanted me. Wanted you how? I wasn't letting her off the hook. She glanced up at me again, and there were tears in her eyes. He wanted to have sex with me. How did that make you feel? It should have made me angry, but it didn't. Instead, it excited me and scared me at the same time. Tony is a good-looking man, not any better looking than you, but it felt good to know another handsome man besides my husband wanted me. Did what he said make you want him? She flinched and then nodded. Yes, it did. Did you go home with him? Not that night, no. I told him I had to think about it, that it was a big step to take. He agreed and told me you would wait as long as he needed to, and he walked me to my car. I opened my car door, and before I could get in, he turned me around and kissed me. And I kissed him back. Then he sorts of pushed me into the car and slid in beside me, and we kissed some more. Is that all? She shook her head and shrugged. We just kissed. So you did everything but have sex? She nodded. Yes, everything but. How long after that was it till he did screw you? The next day. It was a teacher planning day, and he came into my room and thanked me for last night. I know I was embarrassed and felt guilty for what we'd done, but he told me we really hadn't cheated on you. He told me he couldn't stop thinking about me, and then he wanted me more than he'd ever wanted any woman in his life, and he said if I would just give myself to him one time, he would never ask me to do anything again, and he swore you would never find out. What happened? I was mesmerized, I couldn't resist him, so I told him I'd go with him, but it would only be once. What made you decide to go? I don't know, Stu, I just wanted to try another man one time. You and I had always been perfect together, but I'd never been with another man, so I had no basis for comparison. I know how hollow and selfish that sounds, but I'm trying to be honest with you. Then what? We got to Tony's home and went right into his bedroom. He was being so gentle and romantic with me, Stu, and he wanted me so badly, I'd made up my mind that I wanted Tony to have sex with me. Did you have any thoughts of me while this was going on? Not right then. That came later. I was in heat. Shannon looked up at me and used another tissue to wipe the tears off her cheek. I know how badly I've hurt you, Stu, and I know what I'm saying is just making the pain worse. I will never be able to express how foolish I feel and how sorry I am. I know it sounds like the dumbest thing I could say, but I love you more than life itself, and I'd gladly die if it would take your pain away. I just looked at her. I sensed she really meant what she was saying, but it was way too late. I could never take her back. So you were giving me his sloppy seconds, and from then on being with Tony became a regular affair. I couldn't stay away from him. I don't know how to explain it. In many ways I didn't even like Tony. He was brash and egotistical and self-centered, but when he was with me, it was like nothing I'd ever felt before. It was like being addicted to him. I've got to say you were good though. I never guessed. We were careful, at least in the beginning. Some of the teachers at work were starting to get suspicious with the way we looked at each other, and were always touching each other and spending so much time together and leaving together at lunchtime. It's so weird though that I never ever stopped loving you. It was like the two parts of my life were totally separate and had nothing to do with each other. How often did you have sex? 2 or 3 times a week. That's about how often we were doing it. Okay, so how long in advance did you and Tony decide you were going to let me pay for our romantic island vacation and then take it away from me? About a week before we left. He wasn't even going, but changed his mind at the last minute and decided he couldn't stand to be away from me for 2 weeks. When he told me that, I just lost my mind. All I could think about is having him with me for 2 whole weeks. What about me? How were you planning to get around me? I decided to tell you my period had started again, so you wouldn't want to have sex with me. I knew with your golfing and deep-sea fishing I'd have plenty of opportunities to have sex with Tony. Did you really think I was stupid enough to buy that story about your period? I thought you loved me so much you believe whatever I told you. Is that when you decided to let Tony make you pregnant? Before I even knew Tony was going to be there, I decided to stop taking my pills. I thought it would be so romantic to have you make me pregnant while we were on vacation. Then when Tony decided to come, I thought letting him give me a baby would be a wonderful going-away present for him. I told him that the 2 weeks in the Bahamas was the last time we would be together. The newness was wearing off even though the sex was still unbelievable, and I wanted to devote the rest of my life to you. Then the two of you got stupid and careless, and I saw you, and the whole thing blew up in your faces. She nodded. It all blew up. When I saw that you had destroyed all my lingerie and sexy dresses and your clothes were gone, I knew I lost my world. I was devastated. I called Tony and told him what happened, and he said good, But now we'd have 2 weeks by ourselves to make the baby. I was so angry that I kicked him out of the room and told him I never wanted to see him again. Did you have sex with him before you came back to Minneapolis? Shannon's face visibly paled and I saw tears run down her cheeks. She nodded. Yes, she whispered, the night before I left the resort. His idea or yours? His, but I went along with it. You said it was our goodbye sex, but it went on all night. I don't even know how many times, but I can hardly walk the next morning. So, it's possible you got your wish and you're pregnant with Tony's baby. She flinched noticeably, but nodded. I guess I'll find out soon enough. What will you do if you're pregnant? Go to Tony. Shannon shrugged and spoke quietly. I don't know, Stu. I guess I'll deal with it if it happens. Well, I guess I've heard enough to last me forever. I stood. Thanks for the humiliation, Shannon. She began crying, her face in her hands. God, I'm so sorry, Stu. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just got stupid and it cost me everything. Not everything, Shannon. You still have your pride knowing two men would give anything to be with you. I've lost my marriage and my pride. Try losing your whole world and having a giant case of humiliation dumped on you, and then see how it feels. Stu, do you think we could ever get beyond this? I couldn't help but chuckle. What do you think, Shannon? She tried to smile and shook her head. No. The divorce became final almost 2 years ago. Shannon didn't get pregnant from her sex with Tony in the Bahamas. Some people think I was a real jerk to file a suit against the school district where both Shannon and Anthony worked, but I could care less. Anthony was my wife's immediate supervisor, and he seduced her. I didn't get any money out of the suit, but that didn't matter. Both of the lovebirds lost their jobs and are now working outside education. Shannon is a receptionist for a dental clinic and Anthony is selling carpet. I hear that the two of them moved in together, but something must have happened because she moved out after only 3 weeks. I understand she's dating, but hasn't found a steady yet. I've moved on. I dated a variety of women for about a year, and now I've met a pretty, sweet gal with a 3-year-old daughter. We've been an item for a few months, and we've talked about moving in together. My business is growing and life seems good again. I do run across Shannon on occasion, and when that happens, we acknowledge each other and move on. I started this story by saying how trite most cheating lies tales seem, but even trite tales can cause chronic pain and lies are torn apart. At least there is hope at the end, and that's all I'm looking for. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.